Hey everyone. So today we're talking all about the science behind motivation and behavior change and how it's never too late in life to change your course, challenge yourself, and set goals. And there are effective ways to go about this. So if you're someone who has thought about wanting to complete your first 5K or half marathon, but you just keep telling yourself, oh, I'm just not a runner, or I would never be able to do something like that and at this point in my life, this episode is for you. Today, we're speaking with Adrienne Doherty. Adrienne, I met her a few years ago through Spartan Racing, and her story is so inspirational that I asked her to come on and talk a little bit about it. So, she grew up trying out every sport in the book before spending several years as a competitive cheerleader. After high school, however, she fell into a lifestyle focused more on late nights and unhealthy behaviors. Years of the same repetitive behaviors resulted in negative outcomes, just started to catch up. And on top of it all, she was diagnosed with premature ovarian failure in her 20s. It all started with a goal to complete an 8-week Beachbody program that then snowballed into the lifestyle she's living now. Integrating exercise into her routine, paired with learning portion control and healthy eating, was just the beginning. A friend had invited her and her now husband, Andy, to run their very first Spartan race, not knowing then what it would eventually lead to. That race led to more goals for not only completing, but eventually led her to compete in age group. And now she's an elite level racer. Each action led to another, with her then getting certified in personal training, completely leaving the bartending life to coach fitness, and eventually go back to school to then get her bachelor's of science in wellness management. Seeing family members suffer from their own chronic illnesses due to lifestyle choices has helped fuel her to help others find what she has found: a respect for herself, her health, and her overall well being. Choosing to challenge yourself to grow and test what you're capable of is something she values and wants to share with others. Running has given her the opportunity to set scary goals, celebrate the little wins along the way, and be better prepared to handle adversity and obstacles that will most definitely arise throughout life. She has since gone on to become certified nutrition coaching and started her own wellness coaching business, as well as a run coaching business with her husband. The goal with these businesses is to help people in similar situations that Adrienne was once in and help to guide them on their own journey. So take a listen to a great conversation about motivation and setting goals, no matter what stage you're in life. Welcome to the Lifestyle PA podcast, where we talk about all things women's health and lifestyle to help you become the healthiest and happiest version of yourself. All right, Adrienne, I am so glad to have you on today. Thank you for your time. So,
Yeah.
why don't we just dive in? And I think your story is so inspirational for other people to hear. So, if you
Thank
don't
you.
mind just kind of telling us a little bit about your background and kind of what got you to the point you are today.
Yeah, so after high school, got into the food and beverage industry, and like so many people, you kind of get stuck there. So if you've been there, you understand, it's quick cash, and there's a lifestyle that goes along with that. It's a lot of, drinks after work and drinking on the job even, and it just became like this repetitive thing that I just one day, I guess it wasn't just all of a sudden. It kind of built up to the point where I'm like, okay, I want to do something different here. And I got into this like 4 day a week Beachbody program. And I was like, okay, that's just my first goal. And just the way that I felt going through it and like seeing myself transform, it's addicting. So it kind of spiraled into everything that was to come after. A friend invited us to do a Spartan race, and it was like this entrance to where I am now. It introduced me to setting goals and actually working towards something. And the more I added in those more positive things to my life, the more the negative kind of behaviors just kind of didn't have room in my life anymore. And now I want other people to find that. So that's kind of where my passion lies. I'm like, I want everyone to feel this. This is so great. So I want to share that with other people.
Yeah, and there's nothing more powerful than speaking from like your own personal experience and sharing those tools, right? Now, do you
Exactly.
recall like when you were kind of living that lifestyle, was there like a certain kind of factor or kind of influential thing where you were just like, okay, I'm ready for a change?
Um, I think it took me so long because, like so many people, change is terrifying because it means you have to make sacrifices and it means that, I mean, you're shifting out of your comfort zone. So I don't know that there was a particular moment where I shifted, but I had actually like signed up to be a Beachbody coach, even though I wasn't like living up to the standard of, you know, exercising and eating right and all that entails. But like I had already wanted to help people and I'm like, I need to try this for myself. And it was just like, time after time of feeling crappy after a night of drinking and just eating garbage. And I was like, I can do an 8-week program. That's fine. And so it was something that was manageable. And I think that's a huge part of goal setting is you have to do something that it sounds attainable and you can be like, yeah, I can do that easily.
That's a huge part of it, right? And like my husband, who you know, Matt and I talk about this all the time, how like we get asked like, "Well, what motivates you?" Like and we're like,
Yeah,
"Is it motivation though? Is it consistency? Is it
right.
discipline?" Like it's never just one thing. Like it
Exactly.
all kind of ties into each other because what most people don't realize, like you were saying, it really has to be those, like you started off with an 8-week program, like totally reasonable amount of time. It wasn't super drastic because every time we not only set goals, when you set goals, you're activating that prefrontal cortex part of your brain, right?
Hmm.
And then when you achieve those small steps, small goals, like the day to day of showing up and just getting it done, that's what releases dopamine, that powerful neurotransmitter, which then over time literally creates this positive feedback loop of
Hmm.
being like, oh, that felt good. I can do this. Let's do more. And
Right.
that over time is what turns it into a sustainable change.
Right.
And then you're absolutely right. If we go about it the opposite way and we're like, I've never run, but I'm going to go like run a half marathon this weekend, right? And you fail, obviously, and it doesn't feel good. You're doing the same thing to your brain, but in a really negative way. So you're
Yeah.
kind of reteaching yourself, like, yeah, you can't do that, you know?
Yeah.
So I love that you kind of just took off with like a reasonable short-term goal and you slowly built on that. That's
Yeah.
great.
And not to say that I haven't been that person to try like a fad diet. I mean, I was that person. I was like, more wanting to be skinny and just cutting out huge macronutrients and doing the whole low carb thing. Like I've done all that and I've seen like my weight goes up, my weight goes down, and like it's not sustainable. But it's not the big changes that you need to make. Like you said, it's those small, like manageable bite-sized pieces that you realize they make a huge difference over time.
100%. And, you know, it's not just the whole mentality of like, oh, if you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen. Like,
Right.
no, so much
No.
more
Yeah.
goes into motivation, you know?
Exactly.
Like it's
Exactly.
research, there's so many studies out there that have shown us like that alone isn't enough for success. Like you need a plan. Like
Hmm.
you need to be able to cultivate this growth mindset, develop the skills, learn how to manage a little bit of that like negative stress and emotional reaction,
Hmm.
which you know in our Spartan races we experience all the time. Like
For
half of
sure.
it is a mental game, right?
Exactly.
And you have to, yeah, you have to have those tools and support. So behavior change is hard. It's not like we're expecting women to like wake up and be like, yeah, I'm gonna get after it and be super motivated today. Like it takes
Mm-mm.
planning, right?
Right. I don't. I definitely don't wake up at 4:30 in the morning in my comfy bed with my snuggly dogs and be like, you know what sounds really good right now? Some Hillary beats. I definitely don't want to do that. I wouldn't say motivation is there.
100%. Yes, you're exactly right. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about, because the amount of women I come across, and it could be women in their young 30s all the way to young 50s, and they'll like either see my Spartan pictures or see me training and just naturally get into a conversation, and they'll be like, "Oh, I've always wanted to run a race," or like, "Oh, I've always wanted to do a half marathon." And it's like, okay, so tell me what's stopping you. Like, what are
Right.
the constraints or the barriers? What have you tried? And they're just like, oh, I'm not a runner. Like, I could never do that at this point in my life. And we know like that's just not true. So
Exactly.
can you give us an idea of like, if there's a woman in her late 30s, 40s, 50s who wants to kind of take that challenge on and say, run their first 5K, in your opinion, like how much time do you think they'd need to prepare, and what would like a weekly schedule on average look like for them?
I think a 5K is manageable for somebody who's new to running. That's something that can easily be done for somebody who's busy too. I think most importantly, for somebody who hasn't been running or maybe is brand new to it, we're not concerned with them, their PR or a time is just getting them to the finish line. So the biggest thing about starting running is getting your body used to that impact, right? Like it's brand new, it's a new stimulus, and it takes a lot of recovery. So I feel like for somebody that's brand new wanting to do a 5K, I mean, I feel like a couple of months they could actually finish it, maybe like an 8-week plan. I would say they definitely need to do a lot of strength training because they have to have strong muscles, tendons, and ligaments that are bulletproof because they don't want to get hurt. Plyometrics as well in the gym is going to help them get used to impact, and just really focusing on building their endurance with slow, easy runs because everybody goes out and hammers out there and runs too hard and they're like, oh, it's so hard, I can't do this. And I'm like, you're probably pushing it too hard. You need to slow down so that you can kind of chill and enjoy it. But I think if they commit, 3 days a week to running and maybe another day of strength training, two, if they can commit another day, that would be enough to be able to get them through a 5K for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Totally reasonable. And you're so right. That is such a hard mindset to retrain, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
similarly, like I've been active my whole life, but when I had set a goal, like I want to do XYZ in Spartan race, I invested in a coach because you need that support
Yeah.
depending on how, your resources and things like that.
Yeah.
And I will never forget those first few months were physically and mentally
Yes.
painful for me because I just remember him telling me, like, no, you have to go slow. Like, no,
Yep.
keep your heart rate down. And I'm like, I am power walking at some
Yep.
points. And,
And it's
but you
humbling.
just, for sure. But it's shocking, right? Because like you trust the process. And like a year later, I'm second on the podium. Like, it's
Exactly.
all about getting your information, having that support, like seeking out help from a trusted professional and like
Mm-hmm.
to help guide you.
Yes.
Because you're right. If you go out and you're like, yeah, I can do this, let me run 3 days a week for 30 minutes, you're going to get injured, first
Yes.
of all, and then say goodbye to your goal for that year, right? Or you'll burn out because to your
Mm-hmm.
point, you'll be way too sore and you'll be like, this is hard and not at all enjoyable when it
For
can look
sure.
totally different.
Yeah, definitely. Even for a beginner, I feel like it's extremely strategic. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about running being bad for your joints, but I think if you're guided and you do it right, it can be so beneficial in so many ways.
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing that up so much because especially for women with hormonal changes, right? We to decrease the risk of osteoporosis, their running is amazing. Like you
Yes.
need that pounding on your bones. So if you do
Mm-hmm.
it right and you can prevent injury, absolutely it
Mm-hmm.
can be beneficial.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And then, Adrienne, you had mentioned to me, I don't think you mind me sharing. I know that earlier, I think you were in your 20s, you were telling me you were diagnosed with premature ovarian failure. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that and like what it looked like for you
Mhm.
and kind of what you were experiencing and how you kind of managed all of those symptoms on your own?
Yeah, well, so like you said, I was diagnosed in my 20s, but I actually started having symptoms when I was 18. I lost my period at 18, and after that, got on Google instead of going to the doctor. And it was actually the first thing that came up was premature ovarian failure. And in my young mind, I'm just like, okay, I shouldn't have gotten on the internet. This is worst case scenario. I don't know what it is. I actually did see a doctor at some point. I think it was a year or two later, and I was experiencing. I never got my period back. I was having hot flashes. I lost a lot of weight. My mood swings were crazy, um, and energy levels really low. Typical menopausal symptoms. And I did see a doctor at one point, and he pretty much just told me, you're going to be fine. Like, didn't do any blood tests or anything. So I just kind of went on with my life for a while, and I would be on birth control because that's the only way that I would actually get a period. And it wasn't until I was, I think, 24 that I went and saw a doctor and was diagnosed. And my options were pretty slim as far as what to do, because there's birth control for somebody who's pretty much under 40. And then there's estrogen replacement therapy, which may or may not ease my symptoms. So I've been on birth control, and it pretty much, does the trick. It gives my body the estrogen it needs, but it is scary because there's all this, scary research about the dangers of birth control and the side effects. And for somebody like me, there just really isn't another option except like what women take when they actually go through menopause. So, um, and especially being a runner as well, I just worry for my health. So it's just very unknown and very rare. So there's not a lot of clarity when it comes to it. So it kind of sucks.
Yeah, and it drives me bananas that like you were so easily dismissed. Like again, the first time
Yes.
you went there, it was like, yeah, no, there's nothing to do. Like you want me just to live with this from like
Yeah.
18 and on? Like
Right.
that's not right. And there's without getting too much into it, there's different forms of estrogen and different benefits and
Mm-hmm.
contraindications, but we have all that information now, and like you would need to see a specialist because unfortunately, like most primary care physicians and even OBGYNs, they don't specialize in it.
No.
So it makes it really hard because naturally you're just trusting the first healthcare provider that you go to. So you're like, okay, if they say there's nothing to do, there's nothing to do. And
Right.
like there's no reason to suffer through life, right? So
Yeah.
good for you for kind of like advocating, getting another opinion, and just doing what you can and works for you. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember you telling me that like strength training is huge for you because of
For
that,
sure.
right?
For sure. Yeah. Like I said, every time I see my doctor and my OBGYN, I always have questions about it. I'm like, so, I want my calcium levels checked and my vitamin D levels, and making sure that I'm doing all I can to keep my bones strong because like my body is literally going through menopause, and it's just like it's confusing and scary, and I'm like, so am I going to be on birth control forever? Like, what do I do? So I do the best that I can. And that's a huge driver of why I do strength train and why I run and why I eat the way that I eat. So I just have to be like extra aware of all those things.
Yeah, and I so appreciate you sharing that story. And I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that's a big struggle of yours. But I've gotten so many messages from women, whether they're somewhere in their late 20s, whether they're late 30s or 40s, shocked at like, oh, wait, I'm only 36, but this can be me. And it's like,
Yeah.
listen, like 20, 30 years ago, first of all, our moms just didn't talk about it because
Mm-mm.
A, that was our culture. And B, we didn't really have a lot of research and especially research on women up until like
Mm-hmm.
5 years ago, kind of exploring all of this. So, yeah, I mean, to exactly what you went through is everyone has a different story and a different health journey, right?
Yeah.
So people can experience premature ovarian failure. They can have total hysterectomies, whether it's related to endometriosis, fibroids. They can be in surgically induced menopause. They can be in medically induced menopause because they're recovering from breast or ovarian cancer. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are so many reasons why women of varying ages can be having these symptoms and in perimenopause or menopause. So
Right.
it is far, far from black and white, which you've shown us, like to go
Yeah.
through it that young, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
so now I ask you a few more like running questions because I love how you have these super reasonably priced programs available to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so, can you talk a little bit more about kind of like what options you have and what's included in each?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a big thing in coming up with what we wanted to offer. So I run the business with my husband, Andy, and we wanted it to be kind of what the individual needs. So we didn't want to offer a product that included all these things. And they're like, well, I don't really want a monthly coaching call, or I can do strength training on my own. So our policy is we're going to, give you your individualized running plan. That's obviously the bulk of what's the product is. And then determining on if they want strength training added in, then we'll add that in for them. Obviously, everything's going to be a little bit of an additional cost, but if they want added strength training, if they like to have a little more one on one accountability with a coach, we do offer a monthly coaching call as well. I also offer nutrition coaching. So, it's just based on the needs of the athlete. So it could vary from person to person, but everyone's getting the same access to the app, depending on whatever their goals are from 5K to ultra marathon. They get an individualized run plan, which is pretty similar to the way that I am coached, but slightly different on like measuring things such as heart rate and RPE. Um, we don't really focus on a lot of numbers. I think that
Yeah.
can get in your
And I
head.
love that.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And for beginners, so that sounds
Yes.
totally achievable, right? And
Yes.
just because you brought up like heart rate and RPE, so for our listeners, RPE is perceived exertion, rate of
Hmm.
perceived exertion. So, like, if you're comfortably, you can dive more into this too, Adrienne, but
Yeah.
like an RPE of like 1 to 3 is like, oh, you're able to kind of like really comfortably hold a conversation where you're walking all the way up to like 8 to 10 is like you're doing your sprint work and you should barely
Right.
be able to get a word out, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's brain works a little bit differently. And it's funny because some clients, probably similar to yours, are more scientific and numbers based, and they're like,
Yes.
no, like I want to know what heart rate to reach for, which is great. And that's why it's great you individualize it because you can work with them both ways.
Hmm.
But RP, like doing that perceived exertion, I think is much more reasonable and attainable for people to start.
Yeah, I agree. I like RPE because I think it allows you to get in tune with your body. And heart rate, following heart rate definitely has its benefits, but so many people are going to get glued to that number instead of focusing on what they're doing in their run and how they feel and tuning into their body. They're going to be just glued to their watch. And I think that can have negative consequences too. So I definitely like teaching people to understand like how they feel when they run. What does running easy feel like? Test it out. Try to say a sentence and see if you can get it out. And I feel like that's just a much more I like that for better for people that are just starting on a structured plan for sure.
Yeah, and especially for women too who are still having their periods, like your
Yes.
heart rate can fluctuate
Oh
so
yeah.
much depending
Yeah.
on where you are in your cycle.
Yeah.
So,
Where you are in your
and then
cycle, how your sleep was, like, you know, what you ate. There's so many factors that go into you're like, oh my gosh, I was running my easy run at this heart rate yesterday, but it's different today. And that's when we get a little too obsessed with it. So I like RPE for that reason.
yes, and I love how you tie nutrition like into your running and strength programs too,
Mm-hmm.
because I think an old school of thought that still unfortunately exists out there is like, oh, well, I'm doing this to burn more calories, so I'm not going to eat before I run or work out. And actually, especially when you're 35 and older, you are doing way more harm by doing fasted workouts than actually
Yeah.
fueling appropriately.
Yep.
So, can you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I kind of relate it to right now we're experiencing freezing temperatures. You're not going to go right in your car, turn it on, and floor it down the street. The car's not going to, it's not going to perform very
I
well.
tried that. Yeah.
It doesn't work very well. So I feel like it's the same with your body. You're going to feel and perform your best when you have fuel. And we know that um,
That's okay.
our body's preferred fuel source. So you need that to go and to keep going. So I've talked to so many people about their nutrition during the race too. And they're like, oh, I took one gel or two gels and then I bonked it whatever mile. And I'm like, well, you need to be consistently doing it over like the same period of time. And not just that, but also training with it too. Super important.
Exactly. And to get your GI system used to it too. And it
Absolutely.
doesn't, yeah. And beforehand, like if it's 30, 45 minutes before, like it doesn't have to be a lot, like
No.
literally a half a banana and maybe a tablespoon of peanut butter or a hard
Mm-hmm.
boiled egg. Like
Yep.
that's it. Because if you don't do that, like guess what? If your body doesn't have enough carbohydrates to function on, it's going to turn to your muscle and break down that protein. And that's what
Right.
you're trying to build up to improve your metabolism, to lose weight at rest. Like it's this whole cycle, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super helpful. So tell me, so if like for those women who are listening and they're like, okay, I think I can, there is a 5K that I've been wanting to run. And like this is the perfect time frame because like spring, like end of spring, race season is coming,
Oh yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So say they like started an 8-week program, they were running 3 days a week. What are some tips? Like what are some of your favorite road running sneakers right now for women?
It depends.
As you
I am
have a
a
collection of 20,
I know.
probably.
I am a firm believer that it is so helpful to go to the local running store and get
Yeah.
your feet measured because everybody has different feet. So asking one person what their favorite shoe is and you buy that shoe, it might feel horrible to you. So that was something that I really found helpful because they'll measure your feet there and then they'll bring you a bunch of shoes that, coincide with that type of foot. And it's like putting on the glass slipper. Like when you know. If it doesn't feel like, oh my God, that's so comfortable, it's not for you. So I definitely would see the running store first. But
Agreed.
also, I think it's important to also have a second pair, whether it's the same exact pair, but something to alternate with, because research shows that you're more prone to injury if you just train in one shoe, even if they are new shoes. So it's good to kind of get that variation, even if it's the same model.
Super helpful tip. And I waited way too long to go to like an actual running store. Like
Me
I'm
too.
talking more than a year. And it's
Same.
like I can tell you like everyone in the world, even if you're not a runner, you're probably familiar with Hoka's, right? And like
Yeah.
I hate Hoka's. Like I am probably the only person in this world. Like I tried 3 different kinds and I'm like, I don't like running in them. My feet just don't feel right. And like
Yeah.
I probably have weird feet and they're a little bit wider, but like I'm like the only human that doesn't like Hoka's. So to your point, I thank you. Sorry, totally got
Yeah.
disconnected on
No
my end.
worries. That's okay.
Was there anything that like you wanted to mention or you think is important that we didn't get to?
Um, I feel like so many people are like, I just don't have the motivation, or I'm waiting for motivation to strike. And I think that's just a myth, or even like, not to sound harsh, but almost like an excuse not to start something. And my personal belief is that motivation comes like it's earned. You don't just, it doesn't just appear one day. You have to work for it. In this, I have another metaphor for it. So I feel like it's like you're taking your sled and you're climbing to the top of the sledding hill and you're putting in the work and it sucks. And it's like one step up and you slide back a couple steps and you're like, oh, this sucks. But you keep going and going and going. When you get to the top, you still have to kind of like nudge the sled to get going. And then once you're going down that hill, like you keep going and you just have to like put in the work day after day after day and show up consistently. And then it just, the motivation is just there. Because if you think about it, your alternative is to not do it. And then you don't like the alternative. Like, okay, I have this goal race, right? And I don't work out. I don't do well in the race. So it goes hand in hand. So you show up consistently and then you do well in the race. So I feel like it's like you've got to put in the hard work in what you don't want to do, and it's going to suck for a while, but then it just becomes second nature after you do it for so long. And that's where you get that motivation from, I think.
Absolutely. And like I find the entire body fascinating, but the brain is amazing. Like neuroplasticity, like you are literally able to create new neural pathways over time. And
It's
that's what
amazing.
reinforces this. Yeah, like that positive
Yeah.
feedback loop we were talking about with the dopamine. It's the same principle as like, this is why I work on mindset so much in my program because it's the same principle as daily affirmations, for example. Like you feel so weird saying them out loud, but it helps to reinforce and create those pathways that you can literally rewire your brain to set you up for
Yes.
success. And
Exactly.
yep, and motivation, it works the same way. With that being said, just like everything else, it's super individualized. Like everyone has different
Hmm.
values, personality traits. Like what motivated your best friend to do a race or get in the best shape of their life, that might not work for you. Like
Yep.
you actually have to kind of sit down and figure out what you value, what your personal goals are, how would that change your
Hmm.
life in a meaningful way, and kind of approach it that way.
Right. And definitely, I think setting your environment up to support your goals is important. Lay out your clothes the night before, like have things ready. Make it easy for you to get your goal done. I think that definitely helps. Like I have so many people tell me that they'll mention my willpower, and I'm like, I wasn't born with this willpower. I created the habits myself by doing one manageable thing at a time, setting my environment up for success, and doing that consistently over time. And that's what
It's
builds the change.
It's so true. Like it's all of the hard work behind the scenes, right? Like I'm sure you've
Hmm.
seen those reels where it's titled like, "Oh, like you're so lucky." And then it's like the luck.
Yes.
And then you see
Yes.
the million things that they're actually working on. Like that's how it gets done. Like you have to set
Right.
aside time, you have to have the tools, the resources. Like I have so many of my clients like I will make them schedule things a week out.
Yeah.
Like I don't care if you do the same workout at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, put it in your
Hmm.
calendar and,
Yep.
like set out your workout clothes the night before. Like whatever you can
Hmm.
do to make it easier, that's
Yep.
what over the course of, and we know that it takes, there are some studies that show 90 days for it to be a new behavior. And
Hmm.
there are some psychological studies on behavior change that show actually it's 6 months before you actually turn that action phase into maintenance. So I think a lot of us were just so quick. We let 2, 3 weeks go by and we're like, we're not seeing any improvement. I'm done. And it's like,
Yes.
no. Like
You
how
haven't
many
given it
years?
time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it
Yeah. So
definitely
I love
takes
that.
time.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it's an ongoing process. Like you want to continue to grow that mindset, and it does involve a lot of tools about like again, like how to reframe certain stressful situations. Like what are
Mm-hmm.
some what are some things like say in one of your races, and for our listeners who don't know what a Spartan race is, it's essentially running up a mountain with a varying number of obstacles. Like yes, we're crazy, but it's so fun and I highly recommend you try it. Um,
Yes.
But naturally, if you're having an off day or you've failed, like you've skipped three obstacles and couldn't make it, what are some things that over the years you've learned that kind of help you in the moment to be like, move on, reframe it, move on?
I don't know if you know this, but my second elite Spartan race, I did not finish. I dropped out of it like 2 miles to the finish. So, um, failure sucks. It doesn't feel good in the moment, but I think it can be such a useful tool if you come back from it and respond to it the right way. So after you have your pity party, feel all the feelings, I'm all for it. I do it every time I fail. And you have to fail if you're trying hard things. It's going to happen a lot, but you have to find the opportunity in it. You have to think, what can I take from this that I can improve in the next race? And it could be your nutrition strategy. I mean, there's so many things that could have caused you to fail. And yeah, there's been races that I have finished and I had a goal and fell short of that goal. And you're in the middle of the race and you're like, well, I'm able bodied and can finish, but it sucks I didn't meet my goal. Do I really want to drop out or do I want to finish? You want to finish. And so you just have to find like a secondary goal. If your goal was to get on the podium and you're, like you said, failing obstacles, or you have like an overuse injury that pops up, you just have to be like, well, I'm getting to that finish line. And, you know, once you're done with your pity party, you're going to be like, okay, well, whatever overuse injury I had, I'm going to focus on that in my mobility routine. Like, you have to find some way to learn from it and go into the next race fresh with a new perspective.
Yes, like I think a
This,
major thing to take from that is shifting your mind to think failure is feedback. That's all it
yes,
is.
yeah,
Because you can
yes.
then take that information, like one thing, maybe one day we will have time travel, but you cannot go back in time. So, like, you have no
Mm-mm.
choice but to just take that moment of failure, learn from it, move on, because it's not worth
Mm-hmm.
costing you a whole race or missing out on your goal. So, just say, okay, why do you think that happened? What can we
Mm-hmm.
do differently next time? And move on from it. And honestly, like
Right.
there are going to be days where certain things are out of your control, like if you were coming down with something and you just feel off, like we're
Yeah.
human. We're never, even if we have a great mindset, every day is not going to be perfect for us. And I
No.
think truly what creates strong people is learning how to respond to failure and those negative emotions and
Yep.
still
I
moving on.
agree. For sure. I wouldn't be not just Spartan race and running, but I wouldn't be at this point in my life if I hadn't learned from my failures. I mean, there's so many mistakes I've made in my life, but I don't regret anything that I've done because each decision coming out of it has led me to where I am now. And I think that's so important. Like failure is a good thing, and I wish more people would realize that.
It's such a good point because also we're not just, oh, I was like born not to be a runner. Like, oh, I was born this way. I'm never going to change. And like
Yeah.
that's just not true. Like
No.
our again, like research on the brain has showed us, like it's not just the genetics that play a huge role. More so, it's the experiences along the way in life. That's what shapes your brain and develops these new
Hmm.
neural pathways. And strengthens those pathways so you can continue going on and achieving goals. Like
Hmm.
it's just, it's not a mystery why successful people seem to just have like everything going right for them, right?
Right.
It's their mindset and the tools that
For
they've
sure.
spent a lot of time on, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It definitely comes with experience. And I mean, your first big failure isn't going to feel good, but that doesn't mean it's not for you. It doesn't mean you should quit. I mean, if you go for that 5K for the first time, you've never run before, and you can't finish it, use that. Like, okay, I wasn't able to get there this time. We're going to do things differently. We're going to try something new. But it doesn't mean you're not cut out for it. I think setting goals that there's a big risk of failure is so important.
I agree. And I live by that as well because I always say, like, if you haven't failed or you're not really scared or super nervous about something, set your bar higher. Like you need to aim for
Yeah,
higher goals then because challenge your brain, like challenge yourself. There is actually a shocking study out there, not only just talking about like women in the workplace, but just quality of life in general, that women only reach throughout their life 60% of their potential.
that's
And it,
crazy.
yeah, and it measures all of these different factors in life, but that is wild to me. And I think it's
Hmm.
because, again, there's cultural things, like, especially, if you do have kids, you're expected to care for them. You're expected to do XYZ. Like, you have to try that much harder in the workplace, and
Hmm.
so many different reasons. But, like, we really need to start raising the bar higher for ourselves and
I
really kind
agree.
of, yeah, and just investing in self-care, investing in goals for yourself. But yeah, that statistic shocked me.
That is really shocking. And that's unfortunate. And that's like a
Yeah,
big reason of like why I love to do what I do. I like to help people the way that I kind of found my own journey and like help them realize like you're capable of doing this. You can do that.
right. And to your point, so you probably remember this, but we flew out to Montana. I tried my
Yeah.
first elite race. I was nowhere, I won't say prepared because I trained hard, but these elite athletes like yourself, they're incredible. But I finally had the mindset of being like, let's just see what happens. You know,
Hmm.
worst case scenario, I DNF, which is do not finish, and I learn from it, right? And that's exactly what happened. Like I happened to have like hypothermia and did not finish at like mile 12. I dropped out, but I was way behind the elite girls. But
Hmm.
that feeling, I will tell you, yes, I had a pity party. I went through all of the normal human emotions, but after like a few hours went by, I 1000% would have been more disappointed in myself if I hadn't even tried. Because how
Yeah.
do you know what's going to happen or how to learn from experience if you don't try? So, even to the
Yep.
woman who tries to run her first 5K and doesn't finish, that's a heck of a lot better than staying on the couch. Like, at least she
I
tried,
agree.
you know?
Right. Yeah. And that's what's important. People see everyone's successes, but they don't see that the failures are two or three times as much as the actual successes. Like with
Yes.
success comes so many failures, which is
You are
good.
You are absolutely right. And it was so funny. I was just having this conversation with my 7-year-old son who is obsessed with basketball, obsessed with Steph Curry, and has a mission to now get into the NBA. And he will like,
Awesome.
he'll miss a shot, and he'll get so frustrated. And it's like, whoa. So we looked up statistics on like Steph Curry, Tom Brady, literally any professional athlete that you can think of and their failure rates and their stories. Like, if anyone is interested in this, and especially if you have young kids who are into sports, it is fascinating and so incredibly motivating. Like, you see these professional athletes perform, and you're like, wow, they are so gifted. And it's like, wow, they worked so incredibly hard to get there, And I think a
That's
lot of
funny.
people don't see that.
No, it's all the stuff behind the scenes. I think I actually read, I'm pretty sure it was Steph Curry that, I don't know if he still does it, but I read somewhere that he will stay after practice and he will, what a swish is, like where I think that's what it's called, where they like
Yeah.
shoot the ball and it goes through without hitting the rim. Well,
Yep.
he had to do like a certain number of them in a row or he wouldn't leave. And he was there for like hours. So, I
Yep.
mean, that's like what goes on behind the scenes. He's there, like challenging himself and failing over and over and over, but he's keeping at it. And I think that's what people don't see.
100%. And he's like on the shorter side. So many
Yeah.
colleges turned him down and they were like pretty much laughed at him and was like, there's no way you're getting into the NBA. Like it's
Mm,
fascinating. So
yeah,
just kind of have that in the back of your mind. Like you can always overcome challenges if you're willing to put in the work,
I
you know?
agree. I agree for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. So I can't thank you enough for coming on today and sharing so many inspirational stories, like from your personal health to your journey, just getting to where you are. It's truly incredible. And I am just so glad I met you a few years ago at a Spartan race.
Yeah,
Um,
likewise.
so thank you so much for your time. And
Of
what
course.
I'll do is I will post your contact information and the links in case anyone is interested for that running strength program, especially
Yep.
if you're just starting out, would highly recommend. So I will put that in the episode notes. And then please reach out to us if you guys have any questions. And I hope you all have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Beth.
If you're ready to invest in yourself to become the healthiest and happiest version of you, head over to my website, thelifestylepa.org, to learn more about my 3-month lifestyle program, where I offer a very personalized, whole body approach to optimize your health. In addition to your 1-hour initial consultation, we have 30-minute bi-weekly Zoom visits. You receive my 45-page lifestyle handbook, lab work interpretation, unlimited communication and support through a secure messaging platform, 3 months of meal plans tailored to your needs, and guidance on mastering the 6 pillars of lifelong health: nutrition, movement, sleep, stress management, positive psychology, and social connections. I can't wait to connect with you and help you to truly optimize your health once and for all.